RV Family Travel Atlas is sponsored by Jayco. Since 1968, Jayco has been providing a way for generations of families to create lasting memories. For more information, visit your local Jayco dealer or head on over to jayco.com.
And by the Thetford Corporation, the industry expert and innovation leader, Thetford has made RV travel a more pleasant experience for over 50 years. To see a complete lineup of products, visit thetford.com.
And by Go RVing. Away is a place that's easy to find and a feeling that's impossible to forget. To find your away, visit GoRVing.com.
And by Outdoorsy, the largest and most trusted rental marketplace, Outdoorsy is making it safe and easy to make money renting your RV with full insurance, roadside assistance, secure payments, and real people ratings and reviews. Visit Outdoorsy.com to find a cool RV to rent or see how much money you can earn renting your RV.
And by Go Power. For 22 years, Go Power has been a trusted leader in the mobile solar and power inverter market. Their solar and inverter systems and kits offer full-time or secondary power sources wherever grid power is inaccessible, unavailable, or unsustainable. To size a power system for yourself, visit gpelectric.com.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of RV Family Travel Atlas. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Jeremy.
And we write about RV and family travel with our three boys, Theo, Max, and Wes, and also Sweet Maggie, the camping dog.
You can read about our adventures at RVFTA.com, and you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and Instagram.
On this week's episode of RV Family Travel Atlas, we are talking to our favorite RV expert to help unpack some of the issues involved with matching trucks to trailers. Mark Polk is here to break this pretty tricky topic down into some nice bite-sized pieces.
From the specs you need to know before you pull the trigger on a purchase to the most common mistakes people make when truck and RV shopping, we'll walk you through every stage of the research process. This is a complicated topic, so we called in the best teacher possible.
Your eyes might glaze over when folks start talking about tow capacity and gear ratios, but we're going to keep it straightforward and friendly. No truck fights here. You are listening to episode number 193, Matching Trucks to Trailers with Mark Polk from RV Education 101.
Before we head into this week's featured topic, matching trucks to trailers with Mark Polk from RV Education 101, it's time for another summer road trip tip from RVFTA, and this one is sponsored by our friends at Outdoorsy.
Outdoorsy is the largest and most trusted RV rental marketplace, and they are making it easy to make some scratch renting out your RV. Now, we definitely know that some people out there in the RVFTA Facebook group are renting out their RVs. We're doing it too throughout Outdoorsy, and it's really nice to see that some people are deciding to make their RV make some money for them.
Someone's picking up Penny the pop-up camper tomorrow morning.
Exactly. That'll be ours. Third or second rental,
I think it's
right?
our third rental.
A third rental. All right. So now, some people want that RV. If you're out there, you're thinking about it, you're thinking about upgrading maybe, and you're like, okay, I'm going to spend the money, but, are we going to use it enough, or sports going to get in the way? When you use Outdoorsy, what you can do is not feel guilty at all for that RV sitting in your driveway not being used, because it's going to make money when you're not camping, right?
And by the end of this summer, you think Penny the pop-up camper is going to have paid for herself.
If I crunch my numbers right. All right.
She's a hardworking girl. All right, this week's summer road trip tip is simple, and it is straightforward, and it is the most important one we're going to give you all summer. You need to get religion in terms of taking care of your tires and monitoring your tire pressure. All right, we did not get religion right away. As RV owners, we had a blowout in Rhode Island, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I had not checked the tire pressure that morning as we were leaving the campground, and that was on me. And that
we had been actually on a very long trip, and I don't think that we had checked the tire pressure the entire time.
Way to make me look worse, but you're right.
No, this is not you looking worse or me looking bad. This is about communicating honest information to our audience, because that was our third summer of RVing, and we had never had a blowout before. It's not like if you don't check your tire pressure, you're guaranteed to have a blowout.
I would always check it on the way to a destination, but not when leaving.
Right.
But now we check our tire pressure every traveling day. And it's so, so important. It's the number one thing you can do to make you and your family more safe on the road is to make sure that your tires are inflated properly.
Right.
Doesn't matter what what you use to check it, what tire pressure monitor, what air compressor you get. There's all kinds of options out there. That's not the point today. The point is that you need to check those tires before you leave on an RV trip and before you leave to go home and anything in between.
Well, you also need to make sure that you check them cold. So our expert, Mark Polk, specifically says that even driving to the gas station to use one of their air, gauges and air pressure, if you're like, I'll get there, that's going to throw it off. Even that little bit of warming up is not going to give you an accurate read for the pressure that you want. So you really need to actually have your own tools handy to make sure that you're achieving the right air pressure.
And I keep those tools in the truck. So I can at any point check my truck tire air pressure and my RV tire pressure. And I do it religiously now. We have not had a blowout since that point 5 years ago. Of course, we also properly load the RV. We're properly equipped. But it is a simple thing that any RVer can do, no matter how green you are behind the ears. Check that tire pressure every time you're driving.
You also want to check the age of your tires. So your tire manufacture date is actually going to be on every single tire that's on your RV. And here's the thing. Tires can get really old before they're over their mileage. So sort of the experts in the RV world, they say you need to really replace your tires according to age and not mileage, because it would take so long for those tires to reach that mileage with the way that most of us use our RVs.
You might cover them when not in use.
Yes.
Okay, that's something you could do to prolong the life, but you definitely need to check, make sure you're riding on solid tires.
And as Jeremy mentioned, you need to make sure that you're packing the rig correctly. This was something that as newbies, we didn't really get that it was so important. But if you're packing tons of heavy stuff on one side of the RV or to the front of the RV or to the back of the RV, when you throw off that nice even load, you're really going to put undue pressure on.
You might also already have more weight on one side because of a huge slide out, so you might want to counter that by packing some things on the other side, but you do want to make sure you're distributing weight evenly throughout the RV.
And that might sound like you're like, oh my gosh, how can I do that? But don't worry. All you have to do is do one trip through those CAT scales, and they give you those different sides and those different weights. And then once you do that, you can say, oh, okay, I'm really going to have to shift up my standard procedure here. It's not like we have to really think about it anymore.
All right, now that we gave a great safety tip for our summer road trip tip series, are we ready to interview Mark Polk?
Yeah, the guy who really knows what he's talking about.
It's like this almost goes along well with our interview with Mark. It is always an honor and a pleasure to have Mark Polk from RV Education 101 on the show. He's the best teacher in the RV industry about all things safety. And in a sense, I think this might be one of the most important episodes of RVFTA that we've ever done. And it's all about appropriately matching trucks to trailers and making really wise decisions with your setup. And there's nobody better to talk to about this very complicated topic than Mark Polk. So stay tuned. Welcome back to the show, everybody. We are incredibly excited to be here with Mark Polk from RV Education 101. And today we're going to be talking about the most important topic there is. So this may be the most important episode of RVFTA
in the
ever.
RV towable world.
So no pressure, Mark. We'll dive in a second. But first, we have a sponsored message from our friends at Jayco.
Whether you're on the hunt for action or in search of an extravagant getaway, the innovative and luxurious Seismic Toy Hauler is the ideal travel companion. With plenty of space for all your toys and hobbies in the garage, you can have it all with the Seismic, which is backed by the industry-leading 2-year limited warranty. Visit your local Jayco dealer or Jayco.com for more information. Jayco, generations of family fun. Hey, Mark, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for inviting me back. I'm glad to be here.
Well, there is absolutely no one else that we would have on to talk about this topic. I think you're even, a little hesitant to talk about this on our show because it's so complicated, but you're going to be a good sport and do it anyway.
Matching trucks to trailers in the RV world, it's like talking politics. It's like dangerous and explosive. So Mark is going to guide us through this, and he's going to break this down in a really simple simple, straightforward way. So, Mark, no pressure at all, right?
You up for the challenge?
I'm up for it. Let's go.
All right.
do it.
So we're going to start off in this first segment talking about the SUV or truck. In other words, the tow vehicle. And the problem is that as soon as people start looking at tow vehicles, they start hearing a lot of words that they don't necessarily know what they mean. And like you said, their eyes can kind of glaze over. Well, you're here today to walk us through what are the most important things for people to look at when they're choosing a tow vehicle.
Yeah, and our listeners need to buckle up because segment 1, we're talking trucks. Segment 2, we're going to talk about trailers and fifth wheels. Segment 3, we're going to talk about matching them. So, Mark, let's dive in. What are some of the most important things we need to know in terms of the terminology, in terms of trucks and SUVs?
I think, Jeremy, I would start with today, if you look at the vehicles manufacturers are building today, you notice that a lot of things are lighter. They're more concerned with, miles per gallon and stuff like that. So when you talk about SUV, say, versus a truck, there's a lot of considerations that somebody needs to, really think about before they make a purchase. So let's just start with a truck. And what I would say is the reason that a truck's better suited for towing is simply because a truck's designed for work. So trucks use what is called a body-on-frame construction. And what that means is the body of the truck is just bolted to a solid steel frame. If you look at that frame, it would look sort of like a ladder. It has a bunch of steel cross members that are attached to both sides of a steel frame. And that type of frame is really, really strong. And when you put hitch weight or tongue weight on the back of that frame, it does a good job of distributing that weight from the back of the truck to the front of the truck. So it's really kind of a stable, solid platform for towing a trailer. Now, if you look at some of the smaller SUVs and crossover vehicles that are being built today, they use what's called unibody construction. And what that means is there's not a separate frame that the body's bolted to. All the body panels on that unibody are what supports the weight of the vehicle. And when you put it into towing terms, unibody vehicles don't do a good job distributing the hitch or the tongue weight because those reinforced body panels are way weaker than a solid steel frame. So what I've noticed is I get a lot of questions, people asking me, I want to purchase this SUV to tow a travel trailer, and I just inform them that these are some considerations that they need to really think about before they make a purchase. And you have to delve down into, what that vehicle is rated to tow, what the payload of the vehicle is. These are terms that a lot of people aren't familiar with, but if you have a vehicle that say is rated to tow 5,000 pounds, and you think you can put a 4,500-pound trailer behind that and just tow it down the road safely without any, problems, but then you load 3 passengers yourself and you put all the cargo in the back of the SUV where you have some storage space, you have to factor in that payload along with the weight of the trailer, and now you're probably overweight. Something else that comes into play with a lot of these SUVs and crossovers they are front-wheel drive vehicles rather than rear-wheel drive. And what happens here is when you put the tongue weight on the back of that SUV, it actually lifts some of the weight off the front of the vehicle, and it will affect the steering. I actually was involved with kind of like a case where I'm not going to say who the manufacturer was, but a person purchased an SUV to tow their trailer, and the tongue weight was listed on the vehicle as 500 pounds, and they had a vehicle that was like 460 pounds tongue weight, and he said that it actually lifted the front wheels enough off the road that he couldn't steer, and that it just revved up the RPMs because the front tires were spinning and not getting enough traction on the road.
Now,
these are things that you don't think about before you go out to purchase a vehicle, but it's really important stuff.
This is RV Education 101 right here, and this is why we love you so much. I think that so many people, when they buy their first RV, are only looking at the tow capacity of the vehicle and the weight of the trailer, and they're not thinking about payload at all. So what you just said kind of explains why you see a lot of SUVs sagging when they're coupled to the trailer, right? I mean, even with a weight distribution hitch, sometimes you just still see them and they look like they're sagging, and that is maybe a warning sign, correct?
That's correct, Jeremy. And what even makes it worse, and I don't mean this in any way to discredit anybody, but a lot of salespeople at car dealerships don't understand towing either. And when you go in there to purchase a vehicle that you're planning on towing with, you need somebody that can give you some good, solid answers. And what I tell people is to call a reputable RV dealer, a local dealer that you know and you can trust. And before you make a purchase, especially like an SUV, they have towing guides that they can look the vehicle up. And if you can tell them what size engine, what size transmission is being used, and what model the vehicle is, they can go into these towing guides and drill down and find out what the real towing capacity is, before you make a mistake and purchase the vehicle.
Oh, great tip. I would have never thought to encourage that. Mark, tell me this, and I know this is a little bit of an off-the-cuff question, but we usually point people to the Trailer Life towing guides that they put out every year because we just know that that's a very complete reference that we can point to. Do you recommend those?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I really do. Now, the thing is with that, you have to understand when you say you decide you want to pick a half-ton Ford truck and that's what you want to buy. Well, when you go to those towing guides, there are probably going to be more than 50 configurations for a half-ton Ford truck. And what that means is you have to consider what type of cab it has. Is it a regular cab? Is it a crew cab? You have to consider the size of the engine. It could be a V6 or it could be a big V8. You have to consider the transmission. The rear axle ratio is super important. So basically in those guides, what they do is they put footnotes, and when you're looking through there, you'll see a little, A, B, C, D, E, or F. When you see that, you have to go into the footnotes and see what that is telling you. It might say, the only way this truck can tow this amount of weight is if it has this axle or if it has this engine. So as long as people are using them properly, I would highly recommend the towing guides at Trailer Life. But if you don't understand any of this and it's all foreign to you, then it's probably better to just call the dealer and tell them what you're trying to do and let them maybe make a recommendation, the RV dealer.
And those charts on the manufacturer's websites, like you said, I mean, there can be 50 variations. I mean, a new F-150 could probably tow somewhere from 6,000 to 12,000 pounds, based on how it's configured. But you need to look at those charts really, really carefully and learn how to use them. And I would never rely on the salesperson to tell you how much you can tow or how much your payload
Not the
capacity
salesperson.
is.
Maybe get a little higher up to a manager or the service professional, right?
I just think you need to cross-reference every piece of information about the truck with every piece of information on those towing charts from the manufacturers.
All right. Well, Mark, you started talking a little bit about the MPG, right? And the way that trucks are being built differently these days. Do you want to give us a little more information about how that might affect the vehicle that we want to purchase to tow a trailer?
Yeah, Stephanie, that's a good point. And without getting too far out where it just gets really confusing, that basically there's a thing that's called CAFE, and what it is it's corporate average fuel economy, and the federal government has regulations that are forcing vehicle manufacturers to improve miles per gallon by a certain year. So say in 2025, their entire fleet has to average like 54 miles to a gallon when you combine all the vehicles in the fleet. Well, if they want to keep building trucks that are capable of towing trailers, then they have to make improvements on those trucks to help that fleet of vehicles come in at those numbers. So what they're doing is, you probably have noticed over the last several years that vehicles are coming out and they have 6 and 8 speed transmissions, and they have engines that use technology like cylinder deactivation. And all that means is it might be an 8-cylinder truck, but when it gets up to highway speed, it actually 4 of those cylinders shut off and it starts running on 4 cylinders, which improves the gas mileage. So this is all well and good when it comes to miles per gallon, but when you put this into towing with these vehicles, it isn't always the best thing. And you have to consider these lighter vehicles have smaller engines, they have smaller transmissions, and that corresponds to lower tow capacities. So it's really important that you look at a vehicle that is really built to tow, like it has a tow package, and that all that means is, things are, you have a heavy-duty cooling system, you have a heavy-duty charging system, you have oil coolers, things that are going to make it easier for that truck to tow. Towing puts a lot of stress on a vehicle, and if the vehicle's not designed to tow, then you're just asking for trouble. So with all this stuff going on today with the government, the regulations that are being imposed on manufacturers, you have to really be careful when you're buying a vehicle to tow a trailer and make sure that it's set up for that reason, for that purpose.
And also, it's not just about moving forward and towing. It's about braking. It's about stopping with that thing behind you.
That's right.
And that's something you need to really think about.
Okay, so we mentioned quite a few times in this segment already tow capacity, payload, and axle ratios. Let's wrap up the segment by really giving our listeners just a working, definition of what each of those most important terms means when they're looking for a tow vehicle.
Okay. You just want me to go for it? Or
you go for it, Mark. That's what you're best at.
Let it rip.
Okay, all right. Basically, when you're talking about towing a trailer, it's nothing more than pulling a trailer behind the vehicle. Most of the weight of the trailer, if you think about it, most of the weight of the trailer is sitting on the trailer's axles. So the only weight that you're really putting on the tow vehicle with the travel trailer, it would be the tongue weight that you're on the back of the vehicle, and with the fifth wheel, it would be the hitch or the pin weight that you're putting over the rear axle. Now, this is where payload is really important, because payload is basically all the extra stuff you put in a vehicle, and it can include the passengers, it can include luggage, cargo. If you put aftermarket equipment on the truck, like a spray-in bed liner, you have to account for that weight. That all goes against payload. So when you put a fifth wheel hitch over the rear axle of the truck, you are using some of the payload that the truck, this is where it gets a little complicated, because truck manufacturers factor in a 10% hitch weight for travel trailers in their payload and 15% hitch weight for fifth wheels. So you don't have to necessarily worry about the 10 or 15%, but let's say you get a fifth wheel that has 25% of its total weight is on the hitch. So now you've just added that extra 10 above what the manufacturer allows. Has to be accounted against the payload. So things get a little confusing, but what people have to understand is if you're going to put 4 passengers in the truck and you're going to put all your luggage and cargo back there, and then you have this fifth wheel, it's really easy to exceed. So you have to look at what the payload rating is and kind of estimate what you're putting in the truck. And something that I find really interesting is people think if you buy a diesel truck, you're going to get this massive amount of payload. but what they don't consider is a diesel engine can weigh like 500 pounds more than a gasoline engine, and that 500 pounds goes against the payload. So all this stuff is factored in. That's just one issue. Then you have gross vehicle weight rating. So if you max your payload out, then you have to be concerned about exceeding the gross vehicle weight rating, and that's what that is the maximum amount of weight the truck can weigh when it's fully loaded. This is where things get complicated, and to try to keep it as simple as possible, they actually came out with this thing called, it's a Society of American Engineers, it's SAE J2807. It's a towing standard, and they've been trying to do this for years and years and years. And number one was, you guys are probably familiar with what was called the towing wars, where every truck manufacturer was competing against the other one, saying my truck can tow more than yours because they want to sell trucks. And the problem was each of these manufacturers could come up with their own way to determine what the tow rating was. So if Chevrolet said my half-ton truck can tow more than yours, Ford didn't really have to do anything except say, well, we did this, we added this, and now we can tow more. So there was no standardization, which made it really bad for the consumer. The consumer was the loser. So this J2807 towing standard was a standard that everybody would have to abide by, and then they could, through all these tests they do, they could determine what the gross combined weight rating of a vehicle is. And this is, you have to, all right, I don't want to make this complicated. The gross combined weight rating is simply how much the fully loaded truck can weigh with the fully loaded trailer when you combine the two. So they determine what the gross combined weight rating is, and then all you have to do is take the gross combined weight rating that they tell you and subtract the weight of the fully loaded truck, and then you have your tow rating. So it really simplified things, and it gave the consumer the opportunity to compare vehicles that Ford makes with Chevrolet and get a true and accurate way of determining what the true tow rating is.
So really a consumer-friendly development in this world that can feel very unfriendly to the consumer who's actually trying to make, I know that when we were buying our toy hauler, we were really trying to be responsible and crunch the numbers correctly. We also were lucky enough to be talking to people who knew what they were talking about, and it was still complicated for us.
People like Mark Polk. What I'm hearing here, and we're going to get into this again in the next segment, and Mark, you've really kind of clarified this for me in a major way, is if you can, you need to just blow past all of these numbers and just have way more capacity than you need. I really think that the argument here is just get the biggest truck you could get. And if you're close, that's probably not good. If all the numbers are close...
That's a really good point, and something that I like to say, and it kind of does sum it up, is that with the truck or the tow vehicle fully loaded, so take your truck or tow vehicle, load it the way you plan to travel with it, it should still be rated to tow equal to or greater than the gross vehicle weight rating of the trailer. So that sounds a little complicated, but it's really pretty simple. We're going to get into trailers in a minute, but when you buy a trailer, it has what's called an unloaded vehicle weight, which is an empty weight. That's what it weighs sitting there right now. And then it has a gross vehicle weight rating, which just means that if you fully load the trailer, this is the maximum amount the trailer can weigh. So if you buy a truck and you load it up with all the passengers and cargo you plan to take, and it still has a rating that's equal to or greater than the trailer's gross vehicle weight rating, you really should never have anything to worry about.
Because we all pack more stuff than we think.
We all
we all put more weight in it than we think we do.
Yeah, when you start crunching those numbers, when we were sitting there and we were adding up the weight of our whole family and our dog and the bikes that we put in the back of the truck and everything, things got really close, and that's when we knew we had to move up to the F-250. So, all right, Mark, we are going to come back in a minute, and you're going to kind of do the same thing that you just did for us with the tow vehicles. You're going to do for us with the trailer and the fifth wheel, and just kind of walk us slowly through all the important information. Stay tuned.
Okay.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. We are back here with Mark Polk from RV Education 101. He's taking us to school in terms of matching trucks to trailers. We just talked about trucks. In this segment, we're going to dive into trailers, and then we'll come back again and talk about matching them. But before we do that, we have a sponsored message from our friends at Thetford.
Thetford is the industry expert and innovation leader, and they have made RV travel a more pleasant experience for over 50 years. Now, we've got some campgrounds this summer booked up without sewer, so we have our trusty Smart Tote 2LX, and that's going to allow us to easily empty out our gray water tanks. No, you can do it with Wesley. He likes to help with that job.
Wesley's my dump buddy.
In full disclosure, I have actually never used the Smart Tote 2.
You could if you wanted to.
I've looked at it, though, and I've watched you do it. So it has an auto stop level gauge, which prevents messy overfilling, which actually somebody in our Facebook group was just asking about. They were like, well, how do you know?
They were like, once that cat's out of the bag, you can't put it back in.
And we're like, no. There's a little auto level stop. It pops up and it tells you stop filling the Smart Tote, don't make a mess out of things. Right. There's also a handle that hooks right onto the truck, and you can bring it over to the dump station with, no trouble at all. I take videos of you going to the dump station.
It all works very easily, and it's a very clean system.
All right, go to Thetford.com for more information, or you can follow the links in the show notes.
Welcome back to the show, Mark Polk. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Jeremy. How are you guys doing?
We're always great when we're talking to you.
All right, we gave you a breath because we knew that was a lot, and you did it so well. There's a lot of experts out there, but you're also an educator. And, an educator can break it down and bring it down to our level.
There are a lot of experts with air quotes around the word experts. With Mark Polk, there are no air quotes.
No air quotes.
It's in bold. It's underlined.
And he's also a great educator, so we really appreciate that. But now we're going to dive into the world of travel trailers and fifth wheels. And we're going to do the same thing. You're just going to kind of walk us through the differences between travel trailers and fifth wheels, just like you walked us through the differences with SUVs and trucks, right?
Okay, that's a good place to start.
So what are some of the basic, what's the terminology here when for the newbie shopper who's looking at an RV, looking at a travel trailer or a fifth wheel, what are the most basic terms they really need to know and look at?
It goes back again, Jeremy, if you look at just, first of all, I think it's important that people really take the time and figure out what type of trailer is going to suit their needs the best before they do anything else. So you mentioned a toy hauler, someone that wants to take ATVs or motorcycles or that kind of stuff camping with them, then they're going to want to, consider a toy hauler. And when you make that decision, you're automatically getting into some serious weight issues, because not only are you dealing with the trailer, but now you're dealing with all that weight that you plan to load into the trailer. And you guys said, you already realized you had to move up to a F-250 or a 3/4 ton truck because of all those weight concerns. So I think it's so important that you decide. You might get by with a really small hybrid trailer that has the pull-out bunk ends because it's, a small family just starting, and that's, you have an SUV, and so you have to keep it nice and light. Or you might decide you want to go with the biggest fifth wheel that they manufacture because you're going to, go full-timing and travel cross-country. So that's the first big decision, is which type of trailer is going to suit your needs. And once you make that decision, then you have to start considering all these weight factors again. And, I mean, the biggest difference between a trailer and a fifth wheel is simply the way it's connected to the truck when you tow it. You know, the travel trailer is going to put the tongue weight on the rear of the truck, and the fifth wheel is going to put the hitch or the pin weight over the rear axle. So if you're considering a fifth wheel trailer, there's several weight ratings that you need to be concerned with, and we talked about that in the earlier segment. You have to be concerned about payload, that you don't exceed the payload of the truck, you don't exceed the gross vehicle weight rating of the truck, and there's an axle weight rating for the truck. So when you put that pin weight over that rear axle, all those ratings have to be able to support that amount of weight. So just real briefly, something I think a lot of people don't consider is the axle, and this applies to a truck or a trailer. When you take an axle, it's basically the way they rate an axle is by the tires on each end of that axle. So if those tires are rated to support 3,000 pounds each, or you got a single axle with two tires, that's a 6,000-pound axle. But the important thing to think about is if you don't distribute the weight properly in the trailer, you put more weight on one side or the other side, there's a good possibility that you're overloading a tire position now. And, you know, that's what I think people have these tire blowouts, and they have all this stuff happening, and a lot of times I hear them say that the tire was faulty or, you know, this or that or whatever, but what it comes down to is either that tire was underinflated or it was overloaded. So there's all this stuff that starts to, you know, come into play. But basically, when you buy a travel trailer or a fifth wheel, there's what they refer to as the unloaded vehicle weight or dry weight. And all that means is when it was shipped from the manufacturer and it arrived at the dealership, that's how much the empty trailer weighs. So now they give you a gross vehicle weight rating for the trailer, and what that means is you can load it up. Like, let's just say the trailer weighs 5,000 pounds empty, and it has a 7,000-pound gross vehicle weight rating. That basically means you can load 2,000 pounds in the trailer before you reach the maximum. And all that is, all the gross vehicle weight rating is how much weight those axles on that trailer can support when it's fully loaded. So you have to consider all this stuff, and then like we just talked about the truck has to be able to not only haul the weight of the trailer, but you have to consider the payload you're putting in the truck, the additional weight you're adding in the truck. So what it boils down to is the truck, we talked earlier about the gross combined weight rating. You have to look at the gross combined weight rating that J2807 towing standard assigns to that truck, and then you subtract the fully loaded weight of the truck, and that tells you how much weight the trailer and any additional weight you put in the truck can total. Just to make it a little bit easier, if the tow vehicle has a gross combined weight rating of, let's say, 15,000 pounds, and the fully loaded truck, let's just say it weighs 7,000 pounds, that means that the trailer weight rating would be 8,000. And that 8,000 is a combination of the trailer and anything else you put in the truck.
Now, you don't only have to use these numbers before you buy a truck and a trailer, right? There it's theoretical, and people are saying, okay, well, I've got 3 kids and a dog and blah, 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 and here's what that equals for the truck. And then I've got a trailer I'm looking at, and here's, you know, the unloaded vehicle weight, and then here's, you know, how much I can put into it. So you've got all those numbers theoretically. You buy the two, and it shouldn't stay theory. Like, you should load it up and go to a weigh station, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because and really, this is where, you know, again, things get a little complicated. If you just take it to a platform scale and pull the trailer up, you're going to know what the fully loaded weight of the trailer is, but what you're not going to know is how much weight is on each individual axle or on each individual tire. And what I would say is if you ever go to a rally where they offer an RV weighing service, I would highly recommend that you just go ahead and run through that, because what they're going to do there is they're going to weigh each tire, each individual tire position by itself, and then they can calculate the total weight, the total loaded weight. They can calculate the axle weights, and then they can tell you if you have too much weight on one particular tire, which might result in a problem down the road. But then the other thing is, when you weigh a trailer, it's just a snapshot in time, because the next time you go out, chances are everything's not loaded exactly the same. But it gives me a comfort zone knowing that you did it and you know approximately what you're doing and what you need to be concerned with.
Mark, I want to rewind for 1 second, too, and point out something I think is really important for our listeners. I think everyone has to realize that when you're shopping for a fifth wheel or a travel trailer and you're looking at the manufacturer's website, they're going to list the unloaded vehicle weight for each trailer. But I think everyone really needs to know that as you add options, you are adding weight. And you could actually add a lot of weight that way, and that's not going to show up on the manufacturer's website. I mean, for instance, in our toy hauler, we added an automatic leveling system, which
900 pounds.
It wasn't 900 pounds, but it was like 500 pounds. But the point was, our trailer weighed 700 pounds more than it was listed to weigh, but because we added a lot of options, so those options can be heavy and they can add up. So you need to pay attention to that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. If you sit down and option your trailer out with the dealer, which a lot of people don't do, but if you do, then you need to consider, add those the optional equipment onto the dry weight of the trailer. Now, if the dealer, when I worked at a dealership, we would order a travel trailer and we would say, okay, we want the following options. We want a spare tire, we want an awning, we want this, we want that. And then when that trailer arrives to the lot with those options, the weight listed in it at that time would be correct, because that's what the weight was when it left the factory. The only thing you have to consider at that point is, now that it's at the dealership, if they add a battery and they add a satellite dish, or you tell them you want a washer and dryer in your fifth wheel, and they put it in, then all that would have to be added too at that point.
Like our 700 pounds worth of solar batteries.
We added solar batteries, yeah. And, when we were doing that, we were like, okay, do we have the capacity for this? And we had to crunch those numbers. But a good point that Jeremy had thought of while we were doing that is we were lucky we had a compartment that was very centralized in our toy hauler that we could put those in. So it distributed the weight, and it was over the axle. So our dealer, the owner of the dealership was right there with us, like looking at it and determining safety. But Jeremy pointed out, if it was our White Hawk, a good compartment for that would have been underneath those dinette cushions, and that would have been over to the side, and it would have completely skewed the weight of the travel trailer, and that wouldn't have been safe.
Yep. That's a great point. And as hard as manufacturers, they really do try to watch weight distribution when they build these trailers. But if you look at the hundreds and hundreds of floor plans that they offer, and you have this big slide out on this one side, and you have the refrigerators on that side, and no matter how good a job they do when they design the floor plan, there's a good chance when you take it off the dealer's lot, one side or the other side is going to weigh more. And if you can find that out through weighing the RV, and then when you load, like you guys said, if you know the left side weighs more than the right side, then you put more of your supplies on the side that needs the additional weight, so you're not overloading tires and and axles and things like that.
A big honking slide out on one side might be your first sign that one side is heavier than the other, right? Or that you have a slide out with a kitchen on one side. I mean, that could certainly throw the balance off for sure.
Yes, absolutely. But if a kitchen slide that has all this, the range and the oven and the refrigerator and all that on that one side, the other side just has a dinette booth, it's kind of a red flag there.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for breaking that all down with us. Now, we got in the weeds. Not too much, I think. I think we did a good job. But now in the third segment, we're going to take the bigger view. We're going to get out of the weeds.
You got to hitch these things up eventually.
We're going to look at the big picture, and we're just going to kind of do a wrap up and talk overall about just some of the general sort of mistakes or, tricky things that people get into when they're matching trucks to trailers. So stay tuned.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. It is time for segment 3 with Mark Polk from RV Education 101. Now we're going to talk about matching the tow vehicle to the rig. You got to hitch up. You got to put them together to get to the campground. And we're going to talk about some common mistakes people make and how you can avoid them. But first, we have a sponsored message from our friends at Go RVing.
Well, if you want to see firsthand what it's like to find your way and tour some of the latest RV models, then you can visit the Go RVing team at an event near you. Those Go RVing folks, they love to get out and have a little fun at these events. So you can see the complete list of upcoming Go RVing events over at GoRVing.com. You just click on the Where to Find tab, and then it says, Where is Go RVing? And then there's a long list of very fun events that they're going to be at this summer.
And I think they almost always have an RV there that you can walk
that you
through
can actually walk through. They're going to be at the X Games in Minneapolis. They're going to be at the Nugget Rib Cook-Off in Reno, Nevada.
Can we go?
I don't know. We haven't been invited. Go RVing. Bring us to the Nugget Rib
Let's meet
Cook-Off.
Mark and Dawn Polk there.
Let's go with them. All right. There's lots of other events. You can see a complete list over at GoRVing.com. Find your way. Go RVing.
Welcome back to the show, Mark. Thank you so much. Our whole audience thanks you. We really appreciate this.
You're welcome. I hope everybody's benefiting from this, and we'll just try to keep it where it's pretty easy to understand. This stuff can get complicated, as we talked about earlier.
All right, Mark. Now, we've made some mistakes when it comes to purchasing RVs.
We've had a few.
And tow vehicles, and we've kind of done some hopscotching around in that area. But we don't mind admitting that, because we think that if we talk about the mistakes that we know we've made and that a lot of other people have made, it helps people that are just starting on this journey. So that's what we kind of want to do, is use your experience of being decades in this industry and just kind of talk about what are some of the most common mistakes that people make so our listeners can avoid them.
Okay, that's a really good idea. I would say, now, after everything we talked about up to this point, my number one mistake that I think people make would be not understanding all these weight ratings and how each one of them can affect towing. And I think we tried to hit on some of those topics earlier. But I want to just briefly go back to this J2807 towing standard, because I think it's just so important. If people can understand this one concept, then I think it will really solidify things and make things easier to understand. What they're doing with this towing standard is they're taking trucks out on these test courses, and they're putting these trucks through the paces. They go through all kinds of tests, and it's serious tests. They climb a grade, and they have to have the air conditioning on high, and they have to be able to make the grade. They do check the braking. They do all kinds of tests. I mean, I think there's probably 7 or 8 different tests that they go through. And what it all boils down to, when all these engineers do the math, they are going to come up with the gross combined weight rating for that vehicle. This is probably the most important weight rating that you have to be concerned with, and it's sometimes one of the hardest ones to find, because a lot of times you won't find it in the owner's manual. It won't be on the vehicle all the time. But if you can find out what the gross combined weight rating for that vehicle is, then you can learn these weights really simple. Basically, I'm just going to do a quick example. Let's say a gross combined weight rating for a truck is 15,000 pounds, and the empty truck plus a driver and passenger, J2807 includes a driver and passenger that weighs 150 pounds. I don't know what country they're in. But
I was going to say, we might have to tack on some pounds.
But they include that, and then so basically you take the gross combined weight rating of 15,000 pounds, and then let's just say that the empty truck weighs 7,000, and all that means is the truck can safely handle up to 8,000 pounds of trailer and cargo. So that's what's important, trailer and cargo. So it goes back to payload plus the fully loaded weight of the trailer. But if you can understand that concept, gross combined weight rating minus the loaded truck weight, so you can go get the truck weight on a scale easily, put everything in it that you plan to go camping with, take the truck to a platform scale and weigh it. So now you know what my fully loaded truck weighs, you know what the gross combined weight rating, and the final figure is what you have left to be able to safely tow the trailer. So I think number one on that list would be understanding those weights, and that's probably the simplest, most effective way to try to understand that and make the right decisions.
It really is basic subtraction, like that my third grade boys kind of learn, right? Like a total, and you're going to subtract out one, and you're going to get the safe weight rating of the other.
Yes, and then if you just keep in mind all them little small things like the axle has its own weight rating, the payload. If you just keep that in the back of your head to make sure you don't exceed one of them, chances are you're going to come up with a properly matched tow vehicle and trailer. So that is super important. Once you have that down, I think if I had to make a list, next on the list would be that, people buy the tow vehicle before they consider the trailer they want to buy. So this can be a big problem. If you go out and purchase the tow vehicle, that now you're limited to how much weight the trailer can weigh. You see what I mean?
Oh, yeah. And then you fall in love with, this is what people do all the time. You fall in love with your dream trailer at the RV show, and you have this brand spanking new, I don't know, maybe F-150, Jeremy.
It wasn't brand spanking new.
And you're trying. And then what happens is you start to do the mental gymnastics, right? Where you try to convince yourself that you can tow this trailer that you really, really want with that truck that you already have.
Stephanie, I want to tell you something. When I sold trailers and when I was a sales manager, people would get so mad at me because they would come in and they would have the truck, and I would look it up in my towing guide, and I would say, you can tow 5,400 pounds. And they're like, no, that's not right. I can tow, one guy told me one time, I don't know if you ever looked at the receiver that they bolt to the frame of the truck on the back, but it has a little weight label, and it'll say like, this receiver is good for up to 10,000 pounds. Well, a guy came in, this is a true story, the car salesman told him that the truck could tow 10,000 pounds, and he went back there and showed him on the back of the receiver. And we came in.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. They bought a brand new truck, and when they came in and I told them that it was more like 6,000 pounds, they just got mad. They got mad at me. It's like, no, there's no way. So that's a huge thing. Is we talked about that earlier. Before you go out and buy the tow vehicle, go to the Trailer Life magazine website and look up the year. They list those towing guides by year, and they have a good assortment. Probably, I'd say they probably do about 10 years worth, maybe. I don't know, maybe 8 or 10. But you can, even if you're going to buy a used vehicle, you can go in there and find that year, look it up. Remember to check those footnotes, and then buy a vehicle that can safely tow the trailer. But again, I think it's better if you go trailer shopping and say, this is the one we want, this is what we want. Now it's time to go find a truck that can tow the gross vehicle weight rating of that trailer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and don't be deceived, and don't just look at the tow capacity of the truck. I mean, you've gone through all of this, but to put a fine point on it, there are half tons out there, new half tons that say they can tow 12,000 pounds, right? And people think, let me go get a 10,000 pound trailer, and they don't even look at payload issues, right? So the tow capacity is getting so high, but the payload is not rising in a commensurate way, if I'm understanding it correctly. And I think a lot of people are getting into trouble with some of the bragging points of these new half tons and how much they can tow.
Yes, and Jeremy, here's what I find interesting: when they say a half ton truck can tow 12,000 pounds, I guarantee you that it's a regular cab, long bed truck, 2-wheel drive, and that's the truck that can tow 12,000, and it's the only truck that can tow 12,000. How many people do you know that go out and buy a regular cab, long bed, 2-wheel drive truck?
Not people that want to go to the grocery store with it.
Yeah, I don't think we know anybody with that truck.
I know one
person.
guy who had that long bed, had that situation, and he hated driving that thing when he wasn't towing. That truck is not a good truck to take anywhere else.
That's not your daily driver.
Everybody today, these trucks today are actually turning into family vehicles. That they ride so nice, they're quiet, you can tow with them. But as soon as you stray away from that regular cab and you buy a crew cab because you have children and you want them to have space in the back seat, and then everybody wants 4-wheel drive, so whether you go off-road or not, people want 4-wheel drive, and then they want the short bed because it looks better. So when you start changing these configurations and then considering engine options, that 12,000 will quickly go to about 6,000 pounds.
Wow. That's crazy. Yep. I mean, you got to look at this stuff when you're shopping.
This is so helpful.
And these trucks are $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 now, too.
All right. We're helping people not make mistakes and lose money here. Okay. So what else do people do that we need to warn them in advance? Don't do this, people.
I think another mistake that I would say I would put on a list is, not getting a properly equipped truck with the tow packages and the right size engine, transmission, and a rear axle. I think one of the most important things people need to understand about towing a trailer with any vehicle is the rear axle ratio of the vehicle. It's super, super, super important. What you're going to do is probably sacrifice gas mileage to get an axle that's good for towing. But to try to keep it as simple as possible, the axle ratio on a vehicle is nothing more than a comparison of how many times the drive shaft rotates versus the tires. So when it comes to towing, you want maximum power for towing capability. What you want in an axle is a higher number, and all that means is the drive shaft rotations for every tire rotation, their axles are rated by numbers. So you probably heard like 373 to 1 or 410 to 1. The higher numbers, which is a lower geared axle, but the higher numbers are better for towing, and the lower numbers, like a 323 to 1, would be more beneficial for gas mileage. So I think a big mistake people make, again, is you might go to the dealership and you might pick a truck that has all the right equipment, it has a tow package, but if you don't consider that rear axle, and a lot of times it's not published information, and a lot of car salesmen don't know how to even figure out what kind of axle it has, you can make a huge mistake again. You think you've got the right vehicle, and then you find out that it's got the wrong axle. So I think that's a common problem as well.
This is why when I bought my F-250, I had like two of my friends who were both engineers I was texting them 5 times a day. I was sending them snapshots of all this information. So it is confusing, but you have to do it. You got to look at this.
But I like general rules like that. I think that's helpful, like looking for the higher number. I just think that sometimes not all of us are going to get it all, but if you just have those guidelines, it can help you walk through the process and end up with something that works. And speaking of walking through the process, Mark, I know you have a ton of resources that are going to sort of dig down deeper into all of these topics that we just covered, right? This was a broad overview for people entering the process, and now we can point them to all of your, materials that give them the real scoop on paper that they can look at and everything. So where are they going to go for those things?
We actually just recently developed a new training site. It's called RV Online Training, and we put together numerous video courses, and we took a lot of our ebook offerings and we made that, turn those into courses as well. So anybody that's interested, especially in, towing a travel trailer or towing a fifth wheel and would like to learn more, they can go to www.rvonlinetraining.com, and if they use the coupon code RVFTA, they'll get 20% off.
They will. And we have listeners that have used that coupon code and have learned. We even have a listener that just bought a Class C. And I know that they went over to RV Online Training and they used that code and they bought your course on driving a Class C. And that makes me happy.
I just want to repeat. 20% off.
Yeah,
you did not mishear
off.
Mark Polk. 20% off.
That's a lot of percentages.
That's twice as much as 10% off.
That's a good deal. And you really are getting such an expert, laying all this information out. Mark actually knows what he's talking about, if you couldn't tell from this episode.
Just don't get mad at him, if you're reading it and you're like, my truck doesn't work.
It's not his fault. All right, Mark. Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show. We really appreciate it. We know it was tough for you to try to break it down into, itty bitty bite-sized pieces for us.
You're welcome. Anytime you guys have a topic you'd like to discuss, just let me know.
And where else can we find you on social media? If anyone wants to follow you guys on Facebook, where else are you?
RV Education 101 we have a Facebook page, we have a Twitter account, and Instagram, and we also have some really, really helpful free content on our YouTube channel. So the RV Education 101 YouTube, and we have an RV 101 YouTube channel. Lots and lots of information that we just think is important for people to know. Our real goal and mission in life is to help educate RVers and keep them out of trouble. So we like to offer whatever we can in the way of free video content as well as paid content.
My favorite part of the show is when I hear Dawn in the background feeding Mark Polk
the social media
information. She's like,
Hi, Dawn.
She's like, honey, this is where we are on social media.
She just handed me a piece of paper and said, "Don't forget RV 101 with Mark Polk is our blog site."
See, I knew that this was going on in the background.
And by the way, you did an awesome series on restoring a vintage trailer and restoring a vintage truck from the same time period. I mean, that was a really awesome series if anyone is interested in restoring an old trailer too. And that setup looked beautiful. I would love to see that in person someday.
Yeah, I'm really, really happy with that. It took a long time and a lot of work, but it turned out really well. So now I'm trying to convince her into moving on to a car restoration.
Oh, Dawn piped up for that one too. No way. Now, don't worry, everybody. We are linking to every single thing that both Mark and Dawn just pointed out over on RVFTA.com in the show notes for this issue. So you can just go over there and you're going to be able to click through to all of the sites that we just mentioned.
Thank you, Dawn, for lending us Mark.
We appreciate it. Now, you guys have some camping to do, so we are going to let you go and relax at your campsite.
Go relax at the beach, guys. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Welcome back to the show, everybody, and a huge thank you to Mark Polk from RV Education 101. As soon as we get done interviewing him, Stephanie and I start scheming about how we can get him back on the show, so hopefully we'll have him back again soon to deal with some other safety issues. And now it's time for our RVFTA News Roundup, which is sponsored by our good friends at Go Power, who created the wonderful, beautiful, amazing solar setup that we just got to use in Maine and Canada.
Absolutely. Go Power has been a trusted, recognized leader in the business of solar technology for over 20 years. Their high-quality solar chargers, inverters, controllers, and power accessories offer a durable, dependable, and cost-effective solution for power needs when grid power is inaccessible, unavailable, or unsustainable. Now, we had used our solar through the course of the spring this year. And however, we loved it. We were like, this is so awesome. We were all geeked out about it. However, neither of us really understood the extent to which this solar was going to empower us until we hit the road on this longer RV vacation that we just took for 2.5 weeks. Now, before we headed out on our trip, I was thinking in my head, this is going to be awesome at the campgrounds that we stay at that don't have hookups or whatever. But what I realized on this trip is this is awesome en route to destinations. So this is such a good thing to have while you're traveling.
On our way to Nova Scotia, we decided to spend the night in the Cabela's parking lot in Maine, and we had access to everything but the air conditioning. And when you're in Maine in the summer, you don't need the air conditioning at night. So we were able to wake up in the Cabela's parking lot, use all of our lights, and make coffee before we left for the rest of the drive to Nova Scotia. It was pretty awesome.
I love that my refrigerator is on 24/7 in the RV without using the propane or being plugged in. That, I think, has been the single biggest awesome surprise. We'll keep you posted about some other things that we discovered about this, but really it was more exciting than I even realized, having the use of that solar power.
And I think it's going to push us more and more in the years to come to get off the grid, to do some more boondocking. Stephanie used to not really want to spend the night in a parking lot at like a Walmart or a Cabela's. And by the way, that Cabela's was terrific to spend the night because there weren't the idling. Noise. Well, you didn't also have the idling trucks,
yeah.
So it was quiet. There was a security guard driving around. It was like a little campground in there. So I think we'll look for those stops more for overnights on long trips. It's changing the game for us as RV owners. Now it's time for our RVFTA News Roundup. And the biggest thing we got on the menu is that we have the cover story for the July issue of Trailer Life. And I think we're both pretty excited about that, like proud parents.
So the cover story is a roundup of 12 different trailers under $21,000. So it's sort of that entry level and really the wide variety of stuff that's available. Some people out there are like, oh, it's all the same in the RV industry. Well, actually, it's not. If you're looking, at a small RV show somewhere out there, you might think there's not a lot out there, but there is. And this roundup really features just the wide variety.
And I think if there's been a thesis to the roundups we've been doing for Trailer Life, it's that there's a wide variety in every segment in the RV industry right now. You just got to look a little bit.
And you might have to pay a little bit.
You might have to pay a little bit. Now, in the August issue of Trailer Life, which we just got in the mail, I don't even think it's out on newsstands yet, we have an article on Myrtle Beach and how much our family has loved traveling to Myrtle Beach over the years. That's another great RVFTA article you don't want to miss in Trailer Life magazine.
All right, don't miss out on our latest campground reviews over the last couple weeks over at Campground of the Week. You can get that in Apple's podcast. You can get it in Google Play, but you can also get it at our website, rvfta.com. A couple weeks ago, Liz Wilcox reviewed Deer Run RV Park in Alabama. And just this week, Shelley Bailey Shaw from kidtripster.com did another great review for us on Wallowa Lake State Park.
Thank God you
I
pronounced
said that right. We had to practice.
You did. She actually, she made us practice.
Yeah, because she knew. Shelley knows.
Everybody also wants to make sure you've joined RVFTA, the group on Facebook. It is bar none the absolute friendliest RV Facebook group that there is. It's just true, because if people are difficult or obnoxious or argumentative, we get rid of them very, very quickly, and we are not apologetic about that. It is made for a really nice tone in the group, and everybody is helpful. And the thing I've loved most about the group, now that it's summer, everyone's sharing their travel photos and sharing their campground setup photos and just sharing their summer adventures, and it's an inspiration every morning when I check into the group.
Hey, thanks you all for listening, and also thank you a ton for all of you who have gone over and left us iTunes reviews. We really appreciate it. I think it's Florida Knitter, FL Knitter, left us a lovely iTunes review recently. We really thank you. They said, I'm not going to assume it's a she just because it's a knitter, right?
I mean, it's a 90% chance. I mean, men can knit, but I'm sure
you don't see it
statistically it's not
very
as many.
often. This podcast gave me the courage and information I needed to get us RVing. Well-researched and fun, this podcast is so well presented. The information is truly amazing and has given me so much great tips for RVing with kids and pets. The friendly Facebook group is a nice bonus. Couldn't recommend this podcast more to anyone who loves camping. Thank you so much. I'm assuming Florida Knitter.
And
we appreciate it.
love camping. We just got back from Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Maine, and I'm really excited. One of the reasons I'm excited to come home after a trip like this is we get to start putting together the content and the podcast. So we're really excited to have some great Canada content coming to you soon on the RVFTA Podcast Network. Stay tuned for that, and we'll see you at the campground.
See you at the campground.